interview. This time we have a great TTP student, Ming, is with us, and he dominated the GMAT, as you can see. He scored a 755, which is a 100th percentile. He did extremely well. So there's a lot of things we're going to talk about today. What he did with his studying pre-TTP with TTP and all that stuff. And as we're talking, everybody, you can leave comments, ask questions, and we can dig into those in real time. We don't have to save them for the end. And that way we can make sure we get as many questions answered as possible. So welcome, Ming. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share my insights and my experience with TTP overall.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So first thing we can start with is why don't you just give a little brief description of your background so people understand kind of where you're coming from as far as getting involved with the GMAT and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I was a student just a couple days ago. I just graduated on Sunday, so pretty happy about that. I went to the Ohio State University, and I did my undergraduate degrees in Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration, and also a Bachelor of Arts in Econ. Yeah.
All right, nice. And the reason, I think a lot of people always have this question if someone on the younger side is taking the GMAT, it's either A, you're applying to deferred programs, or B, you're trying to take it and save it. So, what is your situation? And really, when did you decide and know you wanted to start this whole process?
Yeah, so I would say last year, like maybe September or October, I decided, I'm a senior, I'm gonna graduate, and this is like the only opportunity for people to apply to deferred programs. And so I figured I would give it my best shot. And then so the biggest thing for, applying to these programs is getting that GMAT score out of the way. So around October, then I was like, I need to start preparing and I need to figure out a timeline for this. And then also more than that, I think that like as an undergraduate senior, I don't really think there's a better time to start preparing for the GMAT because you're still just a student. Before I started working full time and had more obligations, I felt like this was a great time to start preparing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I do work with a lot of students who are undergrads. It's funny because a decent number of students come to me motivated to do exactly what you did, right? And I would say 50% of them sometimes fall off because um, they're in a position where it's their senior year and they like having fun. I see you said you went to Ohio State, so you managed to study despite football season. So that was impressive. Um, and I think, I guess one of the questions I would have for you is um, do you have any advice or anyone, or what did you do to kind of structure your schedule? Because working full time, it's one thing, right? You can get up in the mornings, you can study. You can study in the evenings after work. You can do a little bit in between. But with college, you have your classes, which I imagine usually take precedent for students. But did you try to treat your GMAT studying like a class? And that way you were very structured in your approach of when you would study and how you would study?
Yeah, so since I, decided last year, the semester before this past one, to start studying for the GMAT and get that out of the way, I was able to schedule my classes for this past semester such that I would be able to get more study time in. So I scheduled it so that I only had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays would be completely open for me to just study the whole time. And then I wouldn't have to worry about, um, putting too much pressure on myself to study in between classes or before exams or something like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So and you didn't find that you were getting distracted or anything along those lines. You made it so, studying was just one of the things you were doing in addition to everything else going on in your life at the time.
Yeah, and like I said, since I was able to schedule the classes around my studying, I think that was a
Right.
big benefit. I think if you can, uh, just like try to prepare for studying later on, so like get your schedule figured out before you actually start preparing for the GMAT. I think that's a uh, big
Yeah.
piece of advice
I
there.
I agree 100%. I always tell students sit down, create a study schedule for yourself. Make sure that you can um, commit to it, right? Because if you kind of just do it willy nilly and you're like, well, I'll get to it when I get to it, all these things will come in your way. College or a job, it's the same thing. And I think the nice thing for you, so you didn't mention this, but you were applying to deferred programs, right? Now, some students take it and save it. I think for you, I imagine it was an extra layer of motivation because you knew you needed your score by a certain point. If you're taking it and you're saving it, well, it's like, well, this would be good to have, but I can always push it into the future if I have to. So, did you find that because you had deadlines, because you were applying to these different programs, and as you said, you really only have one shot at doing that, that
Mhm.
that provided extra motivation for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like deferred programs are usually, well, like I said, they're only for college seniors, so you only have one shot at this. Um, and the deadlines are mostly in like mid to early April. So I did find that that did put some time pressure on me. Um, and yeah, like you said, the ability to apply to that, and also if I don't get into anything this round, that doesn't really impact my future chances at all.
Right.
So a
Exactly.
GMAT
You still
on the
have
table.
right.
Yeah, having the score already there was a big motivation for me as well.
Yep. Totally agree. All right. Well, that's awesome. So let's talk about how you got involved or how you started with your prep. So I think you had mentioned you took a diagnostic, and that was the first thing you did. And then after that, you started looking for resources. Was that kind of the order of operations of what happened?
Yeah, so TTP, like you guys say that you should usually wait until after you finish the program to start preparing. But this was before I knew about like TTP and all the programs that were offered, and then the conventional wisdom there. So I figured I would need to take. I figured I would need to take a diagnostic test to figure out where I am, whether it's even feasible for me to apply to these programs, and
Right.
what areas I needed to focus on. And so at the end of the fall semester of 2023, I went home and I figured, this was a great time to take my first diagnostic test. And on that test, I got a 635. Um, my exact breakdown was an 80 on the data insights, 79 on quant, and 85 on verbal. Um, and so from that, I realized, I really did need to focus on quant mostly. I was kind of, the verbal was kind of like, I feel like I didn't need to put too much effort into. Um, but yeah, after that, I decided, it's winter break. I want to spend time with my parents.
Right.
And I will, I'll start preparing at the beginning of the next semester. So that's what I did. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I started January 7th. So I didn't do anything prior to the diagnostic test. I didn't do anything between then and the start of the semester either. I
Right.
just took that one test.
Got it. Okay. That was a very solid start. And then, so what happened after that? You looked online to see, okay, I'm going to need some resources. I have my baseline. I need a goal score. Um, was that kind of the process?
Yeah, so after that, I kind of did research into the programs I was in, and figured out what score I would need to get to be competitive.
Hmm.
And then also the way that I found TTP was, just looking on. I'm sure a lot of viewers would know like GMAT Club, and
Yep.
then Reddit subforum for GMAT. Um, TTP was definitely the most highly regarded and the most heavily recommended by the vast majority of people, according to what I saw. So yeah, I decided from there that TTP would be a great resource for me, since I like the streamlined study plan, the structure overall, the way that they present questions to you in the chapters. And I just felt like it would get rid of a lot of, the small time sinks, like looking into
Hmm.
questions and all that.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's one of the main things that, when we spoke, you had mentioned that knowing what to do and when to do it was really important to you as far as your process. And again, I can't stress that enough. Just like you need to be organized when you're studying, you need to be organized how you're studying, right?
Mhm.
So if every time you sit down to study, it's a puzzle of what you're going to do for how long, how you're going to start, how you're going to finish, that becomes a problem. And then eventually you probably lose your desire to want to sit down and study. So, yeah, that's a huge part about TTP. So I'm glad you appreciated that.
Mhm.
Um, and how did you utilize? And we can talk about other TTP features soon, but how did you utilize the study plan? Because it seems like that was one of the biggest things for you.
Yeah, so I started off, their TTP offers like several choices for, what kind of study plan you want. If you want to include quant, data insights, and verbal. I started off including all three, and then I chose the highest difficulty, so I think it was 685 plus. Um,
Hmm.
I chose that because, from the programs I researched, I knew I had to have a 685 or higher to be
Right.
competitive. And so going into it, I really enjoyed it. A big a big thing in studying for me is the repetitive studying mechanism. So when like learning
Right.
languages, foreign languages, or just pretty much studying anything, I think that spaced
Yep.
repetition is probably the best method, in my opinion. At least it works the best for me. And the way that TTP does it is actually very similar to that. Well, actually, I'll start off with the chapters first. I really like the way that the chapters were organized. Um, Starting off with quant, it starts really in the basics, like number properties,
Right.
um, all that basic arithmetic kind of stuff, and then moves on to the more difficult stuff that people might find trouble in.
Hmm.
And the chapters are organized so that you learn first. So you like read the chapter checks. And I thought that was really useful too, because I get to learn, and then instead of going on to the next topic immediately, forgetting what I just learned, there was several questions to test whether or not I truly understood what I just read. Um, that was big. And then eventually I did some of the verbal ones, but I figured that given my time constraints and how fast I was progressing, uh, I needed to focus mostly on quant at that point. So I took verbal off. Um, and then also the practice tests. I don't know if this is getting out of the scope of the question, but
No,
the
no, keep
practice.
going. This is good.
Yeah, so I took all the practice tests, and what I really liked is that you don't just learn like that chapter and then never touch on it again. Interspersed within the chapters as well are uh, just overall tests that go over everything that you learned in the past four chapters, and at the very end they test you on everything. So going back on to the space repetition thing that I was talking about, that's kind of what I was going for. It really helped me to solidify my knowledge, and just before I forget, um, go over the topics that I covered four chapters ago. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And, one of the things we were really deliberate about in the chapters themselves, and this is one of the things I love about our course, is besides the chapter tests, which I know you mentioned, the easy, medium, hard chapter tests that you do after each chapter, we have a lot of like really GMAT-ish type of examples in the chapter readings themselves. So instead of covering something like super basic after you learn a topic, we do something that's similar to what you would then maybe see on the GMAT. So you get a little sample of like 3 to 4 questions of that topic that you can kind of do more leisurely with those video solutions. And then, you have a ton more to do after um, the lesson. And then, of course, or after the lessons in a chapter. And then, yeah, we eventually do mixed problem sets and review and stuff like that. So yeah, that I completely agree. And that's something that I think is tremendously helpful for students. So one question that was asked is, did you attempt all the chapter tests after the mission? So I guess what's being implied there is, did you save any? Did you do only a certain amount, or did you do all of them from every, let's say, math chapter that you encountered?
Yeah, so I did the study plan exactly how it was laid out for me. So yeah, I did do every single practice problem for
Good.
whatever was next. The Some of the chapters had a lot of practice problems, so some of them took several days for me to just get the practice problem done because I didn't want to get burnt out. But yeah, I feel like that was definitely the way to go. I think TTP is very well structured, and you guys know exactly what you're doing in helping us to solidify
Right.
our knowledge.
Yeah, no, it's been many years, a lot of thought and tweaks have gone into the platform and the study plan, especially. Believe it or not, the study plan started out as a PDF back in the day. So, yeah, a lot has happened from then to now. But the general framework of what we wanted students to do has always remained pretty constant, but just adding things to it that we think are helpful for students. So did you do things? You mentioned spaced repetition, and obviously we give you things to do in the course. We say, hey, review your error log. Here's a mini quiz. Here's a review quiz. But did you, as you were moving through the course, did you make, your own notes, your own flashcards that you would then refer to periodically throughout your prep so that you wouldn't forget things?
I would say that I don't really study using note cards all that much.
Right.
And well, I did use like the TTP's bookmark system. So like if there was a chapter that I had a special difficulty with, I would go back and review that. And I would also review my error log. So after every practice test, I would look at the questions I missed on that test specifically. And then after doing them all, I would go back and look at. Also, every week, I would review pretty much every question that I missed. And my goal there was to not miss like the same type of question more than 3 times. Uh, and because I mean, if you miss that same type of question a lot, then you're not really digesting the material there, and that's something that I really wanted to take care of because given my short time, I wanted to make sure my time was spent well, and that I studied with quality, not just with quantity.
Yep.
Sorry, what was the original question again? I don't know if I answered it fully.
No, you did. It was no, you did. I was just curious of, you'd mentioned spaced repetition, and
Mhm.
I was curious of the things you did personally to kind of integrate spaced repetition into your studying. Besides the stuff that we're telling you to do, you kind of answered it. You said you use the error log, you use bookmarks.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
did you, when you were organizing your error log? Now, for those that don't know, TTP gives you an error log, the framework of an error log in your course. So you're not generating an Excel sheet and putting in links and notes and all of this stuff. You're literally, if you get a question wrong, there's a drop down, you click the reason, it directly goes in your error log. Were you removing things from your error log over time so it was manageable? Because obviously, from beginning to end, if you're adding question after question after question, eventually it balloons up to a point where it's very difficult to use, for
Mhm.
your studying. So were you doing that?
Yeah. Before I get into that question, though, I want to talk about TTP's error log and just making an error log in general. So after I took
Oh,
that first,
sure.
yeah, after I took that first diagnostic test, I figured I needed to record every question that I missed And then also like during my studying, I did like use some practice problems that were offered at NBA.com. But making an error log by yourself is extremely time consuming, and that's
Yeah.
probably one of the bigger aspects that I really enjoy about TTP. I probably spent about 2 hours just creating the spreadsheet for my error log, and then going and finding the questions that I missed, why I missed them, what type of question it is. That just took forever. So I really liked that TTP had a built-in error log, and that saved me so much time. And then getting into the actual question, I didn't I didn't physically remove the questions. I just
Hmm.
reviewed you can like separate the questions into why you missed them. And a
Right.
lot of my questions that I missed were just I made a simple mistake or I didn't read it correctly. So those kind of questions I would review once or twice, like immediately after taking it, or maybe once more during a weekly review or something. But I would mostly review several times, like 3 to 4 to 5 times, the questions that I just didn't understand the foundations of. That was really what I really wanted to do, was to understand why these questions or the solutions are the way that they are and why I missed them. So it really
Right.
depended on my reasoning for missing the question.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's great because yeah, using, creating, adding, subtracting, all that stuff to an error log can take up an insane amount of time. So yeah, it's good that you kind of had a handle on that. You had your own process, but the net conclusion of this discussion, or this part of the discussion, is review is key.
Mhm.
If you don't do it, you're going to think that you have stuff learned that slipped.
Mhm.
And the other thing, big takeaway, because you had a pretty good starting score, but you still did all the chapter test questions. And I think that's so important. Like, I was talking to a student today who was struggling a bit, but I noticed only like 40% of the chapter test questions, or maybe the less, had been completed,
Mhm.
yet all the lessons had been done. But the problem with that is you're not drilling in those skills and solidifying them. You're thinking you have them because you're like, well, I did well in the examples. Things make sense when I see it. But there's a huge difference between seeing and absorbing it and in real time actually succeeding with it. So that's awesome that you did that. So, it's great to see that, our suggestions and our, gentle pushing got you in the right direction there. Now, one person asked about an after TTP study plan. I don't know if you had one, or if after the learning phase in TTP, you just dug into review within the course and practice exams, or did you do anything beyond that?
Um, so throughout my entire GMAT prep journey, pretty much the only thing I used was TargetTestPrep. I did do I know NBA.com has like the beginner study that offers some questions and some diagnostics. I did that, and then I looked around. I actually did buy the OG prep books, but I did barely any of the questions that they offered. I was going to wait until I did my second mock exam after doing TTP, and so on that second mock exam, I think I took it like March 12th, less than a week before my actual test was scheduled. And I got a 715 on that one, with an 84 on data insights, 82 quants, and 90 on verbal. So at that point, I was already very confident in my verbal. And then I did improve in quant a lot, but I knew that I needed to review some specific portions of that to meet my to increase my score to my target. And so after that, well, even though I needed to do that, it was still less than a week before I had to take my actual test. And my priorities then were to not stress out too much, not get burnt out, because I think that's a big part of it. I experience a lot of test anxiety. If I stress out too much, I can see myself panicking on the actual test. and then really bombing it that way. So at that point, what I did is, instead of practicing new questions using the OG prep materials that I bought, I went back to TTP and redid some of the chapter tests and reviewed the questions I missed.
Got it. Okay. And you only took, and this is a question I was going to ask it anyway. You only took 2 practice tests before your real thing, right?
Yes. My intention was to take a lot more, but
Right.
I was lagging behind a little bit on the plan that I made. So even though I was talking earlier about how important it is to make a plan, I was still lagging behind.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Yeah. So
in theory, that happens.
Yeah, I bought all of the tests 3 through 6. I bought all those. I didn't end up using them. Yeah, I just did one.
Well, you had them if you needed to retake. I mean, my suggestion is always to take all of them. Obviously, if you're up against it and you have a deadline, you know, sometimes things have to be shifted. And that is something too. A plan is great. A malleable plan is better. And a longer term plan is great too. You know, you had one semi long term and malleable, but yeah, things happen, and what you predict early on isn't necessarily how things pan out. So, if there's anything anyone can learn from it, you did really well, but it's possible you don't. It's not an ideal situation to be in, even though you made it work. I always say, hey, if you think you need 6 months, give yourself 8 or 10. You know, if you think you need 8, give yourself 10 or 12. Whatever it is, put cushion there, because you never know what life events are going to take place during your prep, and also how your prep in general is going to go. Maybe you're weaker than you thought at something and it's going to take longer. Flip side is you could be done earlier, but great. That's an added bonus if you're done earlier. It doesn't hurt you that you plan for more time than you need. It just means you'll have more time to either deal with your apps or have a cushion prior to when you have to start your apps. So yeah, so that's interesting. And I guess if you weren't hitting your score goal, would have you waited, or did it not matter at that point? Like, you had to get this thing done.
Yeah, so I had a kind of a contingency plan. So I had already set my testing day as March 18th at like the start of the semester when I started my actual GMAT prep. And the deadlines were, early to mid-April. So I figured that if I didn't do as good as I wanted to on that first test on March 18th, I would reschedule again for a couple weeks later,
Right.
just not apply to the programs that were earlier in April and only apply to the ones later. Yeah, so I mean that was I guess my contingency plan. If I didn't do good on that second one, I mean I was applying to deferred anyways. I still have a couple of years. A lot of people apply through the regular admissions, and I would have just done that if nothing worked out.
Right. That's a good call too, because I mean, that's the cool thing. You say, I want to do deferred. If it doesn't work, you can still save your GMAT. Obviously, you need to use it in 5 years, but it gives you about a 3 to 4 year working window, and still have it for when you need to apply. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a tremendous move. I mean, if I look back in my undergrad years, many, many moons ago, and just look at where I was at then versus like what was going on when I was working and trying to deal with the GMAT. Yeah, it would have been great to have it, because you'll see, like, well, if you end up getting into your deferred programs, well, you may see it anyway, because when you're out, you're going to see coworkers really scrambling, especially in their mid-20s. Like, everyone's going to weddings, and I mean, I can't tell you how many students are like, well, I can't do much this weekend because I have, or the next 3 weeks because I have 19 weddings to go to. It's like, it literally is a thing that happens, and it affects your studying because it's travel and social things. But yeah, so anyway, it's good to have it done is my main point. So you're in a great spot. Anyone who's considering doing it, I get it. You're a senior in college. You probably want to have fun and focus on certain things. But if you can handle both, do it. You have less responsibilities for most of you. That's just the way life works. So take advantage of that.
It's
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have a wedding to go to for one of my event studies in like a week and a half. But
There you go.
a little on that, a big thing was I think that if you're considering deferred programs, also consider how the rest of your application is and think through like, is it worth taking the GMAT at this time? I've thought it was. I think it usually is worth it to take it during your grad years rather than when you're working. But yeah, like consider, do you have good recommenders? How are your grades, extracurriculars, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, deferred programs do seem more random in this, like, because you have less to go off of. Like when you apply to business school 4 or 5 years out, yes, you want to have extracurriculars and volunteering experience and all of that stuff that shows you're doing stuff outside of the professional workplace. But you also have a career that you've built on that you can point to, which have specific recommenders within your career that then show your path from this career to either continuing it or being a career changer. When you're in college, it's a whole different ballgame because you're just in college. So you have to craft a very specific story. So I agree. Be super deliberate about whether you think you have a good shot at deferred programs. Reach out to consultants, admissions people, whatever. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, you can save your GMAT score.
Exactly.
So back to TTP. So you did everything in the quant section. I think you said you did all of the data insight stuff too, or most of it.
Yeah, I did that in the week prior to my March 12th, the second mock exam I took.
Oh, got it. Okay. And you finished all the chapters, all the chapter tests. And did you find, we spent a lot of time on data insights. We're still, continuously adding things, but we feel like it's a very thorough part of TTP. Did you find that when you were taking your practice exams and of course on the real GMAT, like the skills we helped you build in those chapters, the questions we gave you, did you find those to significant or to sufficiently prepare you for the exam on DI?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the actual test, I got I got an 88 on the data insight section. So definitely big improvement from my original score on my first and second exams. But I would say that for TTP, the questions were very similar for verbal data insights and quant. I found that all the questions were very similar to how they actually are on the test. I would say that TTP did cover a bunch of the weird graphs that you might never have seen before in real life or anything that sometimes occur on the actual test. And it just kind of prepares you for those kinds of scenarios because data insights is really strange. I mean, I've never taken the GMAT, the classic GMAT version or anything, so I don't know what it was like before. But going into it, it just seemed like a very strange portion of the test. So I think that TTP kind of prepared me for, getting more used to that and adapting to some of those questions that I've never seen before.
Yeah, agreed, and that's great because a lot of people are nervous about, hey, where do I practice data insights? And I do tell them that our course has a very thorough coverage of that, and it'll continue to be tinkered with as more stuff comes out. But we think it gives you a great handle on those question types and the opportunity to do really well. As you did, 88 is a great percentile, so that's super impressive. In I think you mentioned this, your timeline through TTP was 2 months. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a little bit over 2 months, like a couple days over.
Okay, and how many hours a week about?
So my focus was on getting good study in. For everything, I like to do quality over quantity. So I got an average of 2.5 hours per day. I don't know off the top of my head what that is, like 17.
About 20. That's about, oh yeah, I was multiplying by 9 for some reason. Yeah, no, that's 7 days in a week. Yeah, that's about almost 18 hours, which is actually what I recommend students do. So you were right on the cusp of that.
Mhm. I thought that that was a good balance to make sure, I didn't get burnt out or anything.
Yeah.
Test anxiety kind of it starts to flare for me too if I'm spending too much time on something. I start
Right.
doubting myself and that kind of
Oh, I
stuff.
know. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then also, like I mentioned before, my school schedule, I did it so that I don't have classes Mondays, Wednesdays, or Fridays. So
Right.
uh, instead of doing like an hour a day or 2 hours a day, I was able to get big blocks of studying in on those days that I didn't have other obligations.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think that well that kind of studying style fits me more. Some people might like to do half an hour a day or something like that, but I just felt that I could get more done in one sitting.
Right. No, I agree. That's really good. I think what you did in 2 months is impressive. A lot of people need more time than that. You also
Mhm.
were starting in a pretty solid spot. So, as I say, you did what was right for you. It took you needed 2 months. If someone needs 6 months, so anyone watching this, like, don't look at Ming's situation and say, "Man, why am I so off the mark here?" Ming did this in 2 months. It's his journey. Everyone's journey is personal, and everyone needs their own amount of time, and it's finite. That's the way you got to look at it. Like, yeah, does it suck in the moment? Probably. I mean, I'm sure you'd rather be doing a lot of other things than studying when you're studying. I mean, I'm sure there's a level of motivation because you know what you're building for, but in that very moment, Ming, I'm sure you had friends doing more fun things, and they're studying now. It's probably similar, right? Um,
Mhm.
but if you understand that it's finite and that it will help you in the end, then that's really the motivation you need, right?
Absolutely. I think that people shouldn't look at my story and get discouraged either. Like I also read like debriefs and all that kind of stuff of people getting good
Right,
scores and all that kind of stuff. I just don't let it discourage you because it's your journey, like you said. Um,
right.
and work for me might not work for somebody else, but I think that I mean it's just your journey. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the tips you've given are very valid and solid. I think it's just, yeah, it might take other people longer to get to the point they need to get to. As you said, you didn't need verbal, so you turned it off. That's great. You stuck with the stuff you needed, and that obviously significantly reduced the amount of time that you needed to study. Um, so yeah, I think everything you've done is super impressive. Um, if there was anything you could leave with everybody here or anyone watching the recording, what's like a main piece of advice you would give that you think was huge for you and could be huge for anyone else watching this?
yeah, I think that the biggest tip I can give for someone preparing for the GMAT is to just try to understand intuitively why the numbers work that they do. And this is kind of like my advice for everything, not just GMAT. You can like try to memorize all the formulas and um, do all the practice in the world, but if you don't understand what you're actually doing or why something works out the way that it does, um, you're not gonna make too much progress. So, for example, like what I thought was the most interesting actually was the combinatorics section. So like
Hmm.
permutations and combinations, that kind of stuff. At first, I had no idea like how to reason through those questions, and I would just use the formulas. But
Right.
as as the course teaches you, um, the GMAT is going to throw oddballs at you, uh, especially with those kinds of questions that are hard to reason through. But if you understand, why the answer is what it is and how to get to that answer without using the formula, and knowing just intuitively why it works, I think that will work wonders for you on the GMAT and in life in general. It'll just increase your reasoning capabilities and all that. And then a smaller piece of advice is um, to respect yourself and to not push yourself to over your limits. Like I said, I experience test anxiety myself, so
Right.
giving myself breaks, sometimes rewarding yourself for doing good on a mock or something like
Yeah.
that, it goes a long
Definitely.
way. Yeah, and
Agree.
then well, even after doing all that, giving myself breaks, I like set aside 9 hours before the test to get good rest in. I was still so
Yep.
stressed out. I was
I'm
tossing
sure.
for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I guess the week before, go through the routine that you would do on the day of the actual test. So don't just,
Mm-hmm.
mess up your sleep schedule just for the test. Do it a week beforehand. Get 9 hours of sleep every day if that's what you want to get before the test. And then also eat a good breakfast. But yeah.
Yes, for sure. Get eat something good. Don't drink too much because then you'll have to use the bathroom, and that's problematic if you only have one break. But yeah, I agree. That's all really, really great advice. I think you did some extraordinary things. I'm super pumped that you did all this through Target Test Prep, which is awesome. So I think that's good. I think we've given people a lot of things to think about and to follow in their prep. So thank you for sharing all this today.
Mhm.
I do think this is going to provide some motivation to people out there. Your 755 100th percentile is amazing. So you can rest easy. Your GMAT is sufficiently or closed. You don't have to deal with it anymore. And thanks everybody for watching and participating. And as you know, I'll be back soon enough with another TTP student to give you some more insights and share their story. So yeah, thanks again, Ming, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody. Have a safe, healthy week. If you need anything from us at TTP, reach out. Till next time, thanks again, Ming, and I'll talk to everybody soon.